I analyzed 56 startups that became unicorns in 2024. And if you stay until the end of this video, I'm going to show you the one startup you need to learn from, especially if you're an early stage founder and you're raising pre seed or seed funding. Out of all the 56 unicorns, this one unicorn stood out for me, for my audience, for you out there watching my YouTube channel on how to build a unicorn, especially if you want to raise significant funding and get to that almighty unicorn status. This video is going to be for you. So like I said, stick to the end of the video and I will show you step by step all the things that you need to learn from this one startup. Before we continue, my name is Ed Kang. I'm a 7-time funded founder with 2 exits. I'm also the chief strategy officer for startups.com. I advise over 600 active members, active startups, active founders right now. And I also have 4,000 startups in our alumni network. I've raised over $100 million for my startups, other people's startups, as well as startups funds. And I work with a team with experience that have raised over $750 million for other startups. And those startups have gone on to raise billions of dollars. I like to use this YouTube channel to help early stage founders, especially if you're raising pre-seed or seed funding. I love that stage. These videos are going to be for you. If you're part of startups.com, thank you so much for joining us. If you're not part of startups.com, check out the URL. Pretty easy to remember. It's pretty popular. A lot of free resources. And while you're here, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let's jump into analyzing the 56 unicorns. Let me take some time to explain to you the methodology so that you understand where I'm coming from and why I think this is important. First, what I want to make sure is that I eliminated AI startups, because AI, well, that's just a given. If you got legitimate AI, you're going to become a unicorn eventually if, like I said, you're building legitimate AI. And we're talking about base models. We're talking about the models that have quickly gained traction and are super popular. It was on trend. I think I saw 28% of all investments were going into AI. That's unheard of. So I'm going to just take AI off the table. If you're an AI founder, well, you kind of have an easy mode right now, except for all the competition out there. But I wasn't going to highlight any of the AI companies. Next is I looked at the deep tech founders and I said, you know what? That's not something that we need to learn from, because most of us founders, especially those of you on this channel, are not deep tech founders. And if you got something deep and sciencey, well, it's a completely different road to raise money and become a unicorn. Deep tech or hard tech or hardware is hard for a reason. I decided to eliminate those from my list as well. Finally, we got to the startups that any founder could start. I want to make sure that I eliminated founders that have major, massive exits or have a distinct advantage. I wanted to make sure that we looked at the startups that we could study and model here on this channel for those of you out there that you could learn from. And I boiled it down to one startup because I want you to take away this important lesson from this startup. The one startup is called Flex, and they are a rental payment platform. They were founded in 2019. I want you to keep that number in mind, 2019, because guess what? A lot of things happened in 2019 if you've been around or you weren't living under a rock, as well as this is 5 years in the making. They became a unicorn by 2024, so that's 5 years. You want to keep that time frame in mind because we're going to talk about it. They have so far facilitated over $8 billion in rental payments. I don't know if that's the most recent number, but that's the number that I could find. $8 billion. They also charge 1% of those $8 billion, plus they charge $15 a month, and I believe they have about 6 million properties available on their platform. We're talking about lots of money because if you're using Flex, you're paying $15 a month plus 1%. That's a lot of money to be made. They raised $200 million last year in a Series D. ABCD, they went and raised seed. They did not raise pre-seed. They bootstrapped. It's another lesson for us to learn. And then they're at D round, which means they're about to pretty much go public, or they're going to be acquired for basically $1 billion or more than $1 billion, because that's what they're valued at right now. To date, they raised over $400 million. Think about how much money that you need to raise to become a unicorn. And they've got investors like Tiger Global, they're the infamous ones, and Spark Growth Ventures, including a whole bevy of other investors if you go look them up. This is Flex. So what do you need to learn as an early stage founder from this startup? First of all, you want to be asking yourself, how do I unicorn like Flex? And I use the term unicorn like Y-O unicorn because you may not want to get to the point where you're raising $400 million and you have a $1.9 billion valuation. I want you to stop and really think about this for a moment. The amount of effort and energy that it takes to get to a point where you are a unicorn, and the ownership that you're going to have is probably going to be in the single digits. You're going to work really, really hard to exit. And if you exit out as a unicorn, yes, if you get to $2 billion, you may exit out for $40 to $80 million in terms of your ownership. And that's a lot of money. That's like total FU money right there. But the amount of work and the potential risk that you undertake raising VC, well, it's not for everybody. So you have to be asking yourself, to become a company like Flex, do I have what it takes, or do I even have the desire to build a unicorn? Or maybe you want to build a YO unicorn and say, I'm happy getting to $10 million and exiting it out for $50 million, where I own either half of the company or all of the company, because it doesn't take that much to be bought by private equity. I want all of you to be thinking about this, because it's not always the best path to go unicorn, UNICORN. Maybe you need to be thinking about unicorn based on your lifestyle, your goals. Because for me, I tried unicorns for many years and they didn't work out. I'm happy building my startups that give me a very comfortable lifestyle. Think about it for a moment. Now, the first thing you need to do is pick a painful problem. Remember, I said 2019. What was going on there? Well, guess what? People were struggling to pay rent, but then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden everything came together, and they started thinking about it as COVID hit, and they watched people struggle, and they built for a painful problem in the market. I'm just going to shoot straight for all you founders out there. You send me your pitch decks. I talk to all of you. Most of you are not building solutions for painful enough problems to go unicorn. Like I said, that's okay. But don't think for a moment that investors like Tiger Global or Spark Ventures are going to pay attention to you unless you're building a solution for a very painful problem. It needs to be a $1 billion problem. And guess what? If Flex has facilitated $8 billion in rental payments, well, that is a $1 billion problem times 8. On top of which, many founders, those of you out there, you might be creating a solution looking for a problem. You stop and you go, hey, this would be really neat. I want this in my life. Maybe it solves a problem for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not a painful enough problem to become a startup where other people want it. You may create the best technology in the world. A lot of people create great widgets, great gizmos, and nobody needs them because they're not painful enough. This was coming together, and they basically struck gold. Flex's founders did, in terms of finding a startup with a super painful problem. And not only is it painful for people paying rent, but it's painful for the property management companies or the people that own the rental properties, because they're not getting paid either. And they have to go through all these hoops. They have to jump through all these hoops and do all this rigmarole to chase down these renters when COVID is preventing people from paying rent because of all the lockdowns and just paying across the board. It made a lot of sense. Not to mention, all the software out there was so antiquated that they didn't know how to solve this problem. So you have a novel condition with a new painful problem, and now a technology company can step in and reduce the friction, and rental companies, as well as the renters, are running to Flex saying, thank you so much for solving this problem. And that's how you know you've got founder market fit. You understand the market, and you've created something that has problem solution fit, because people are running to you and saying, thank you for solving my problem, and this is exactly what I need. Think about, are you solving a painful problem? Next, this is what I loved about this story, is that Flex created a manual MVP first. They literally took in a check from a renter, and they paid the rental property or the rental property management company manually. It was a bank transfer. They facilitated online. It was a manual MVP. And to me, that's where they really saved themselves a lot of heartache instead of building things that people wouldn't necessarily want. Now, in hindsight, so many founders look at past previous startup successes and go, duh, that's a no-brainer. Think about Airbnb. In the beginning, everybody said Airbnb is a dumb idea. Now, today, people go, well, of course, people got extra rooms. They got couches to let people crash. They got extra mother-in-law suites or basement suites. Airbnb makes sense. But you have to understand, in the beginning, investors, forward-thinking, innovative investors, and the market said this is a dumb idea. And I can imagine what they thought. They said, well, guess what? It should be called Rent Your Couch to an AxeMurderer.com. Because in the beginning, they had this thesis that you actually had to be in the place and serve the renter breakfast. And it literally was an air mattress in a room air, bed, and breakfast. And the initial investors said, we don't understand this concept. It sounds really dumb, but we like the founders, so we're morbidly curious. Let's give you some money to go figure it out. It's the same thing with rental payments. You may look back and go, duh, that's a no-brainer because Flex figured it out. There was a founder a long time ago that sent me a pitch deck, and they sent me the exact same pitch. And I said to myself, this has a lot of problems to it. There are so many problems that need to be solved. But because I'm a founder, I said, hey, if you could solve it, this is a major, major problem. Well, Flex went and did that. And I'm sure there were a lot of meetings with people, investors saying, this is a dumb idea. There's too much risk. And I bet you there's a lot of investors that passed on it, just the same way a lot of investors passed on Airbnb. That's why you want to do a manual MVP first, because you can learn how it works. You can get in front of the customer, the user. You can see if your solution, in theory at least, will solve the problem. And a lot of times, founders, those of you out there, you come up with solutions where you have to spend $50,000, $100,000 on an MVP for an initial prototype. I get it. If you're building SaaS or you're building something that is an AI that looks at SaaS and is disrupting the whole thing, and you have to be spending all this money to put in code, well, some of you founders, you can afford that. Maybe you've already got pre-seed funding. Maybe you've already got capital that you can bootstrap with. Maybe you have the technical skills. But for most of you founders out there, you can't build a $100,000 MVP. I can't. That's the reason I like to shrink my MVPs down, focus on the problem, and say, what is a problem that I can solve manually? And I've got more videos coming in the future. You want to subscribe to this channel where I'm going to show you where I built an MVP, low tech, no tech in some cases, and I've already sold and gotten customers and investor interest. So if you can do things manual up front, that is how you can build a unicorn, not a UNICRON, but a YO unicorn based on what you can do, your capacity, and your choices. Now we get to what they did in terms of integrated channels. And this is very important because they attribute a lot of their growth and their success to the channel partnerships. They basically embedded themselves in a lot of the software out there, and they went and worked with the rental companies because this is a two-sided problem. It's not just renters, it was rental companies. And so they worked on installing themselves in the software that these rental companies already used. Of course, when you're looking at users, they had to create their own app. They got their own app right now, but they can't just force rental companies or motivate them. It's hard to make them change to adopt a new software. That brings us to the next principle. When you're building an MVP and now you're solving the problem manually, you can begin to understand what are the behaviors of the people involved, your users, and say, how can we remove the friction? And that's so important because so many founders, those of you out there, you're building software that's standalone, that makes a company, a B2B company, change their behavior. Think about for consumers. How many apps are there out there for consumers? How many apps do you have on your phone that you barely even touch? I basically access the first maybe 2 screens on my phone. Getting me to change my behavior and use another app, that requires a lot of energy, a lot of investment, and you better be solving a painful enough problem for me to run to you and say, I will definitely start using this app. But what if you could create channels, partnerships, where your solution embeds itself and removes the friction of their problems, and they deliver it for you? And this is happening all over the place. If you could build your own centralized database of people coming in and you own the customers, that's great. But how do you get there? Maybe you start off in another hub. I was talking to a founder the other day, and instead of them starting off their own app, well, how about if they embed themselves in another app or another social media platform? Start a channel, start a Twitter account. Sorry, X. I'm on Reddit. I'm building audiences right here on YouTube. Eventually, yeah, I'd love to port over everybody to my own little kingdom, my own little app, but that's going to take time and money. But too many of you founders out there, you jump right away to saying, I need to have my own standalone app. What if you can install something on WhatsApp or a messaging platform or use SMS? What if you could use ChatGPT, Custom GPT? Yes, the Custom GPT store isn't dominating and destroying everybody like everybody thought it would, but at least it's a way for you to embed yourself into a framework, into an environment where you don't have to build things from scratch. Think about combining that with the channels that your users are already using, and you will remove the friction, not just for them, but for your traction as well. And that is what Flex did. Now, here's the last point that I want you to think about. If you want to build a unicorn or a YO unicorn, you need to figure out, can I do all of this in 5 years? That's the reason that I flagged 2019, because it took them basically 5 years. And here's what happens. If you want the funding to become a unicorn company, you need to be able to raise a $200 million round Well, you better have the growth to become a unicorn and start generating that revenue to qualify in 5 to 7 years. That is the time frame. I want to give you feedback for those of you founders who send me your pitch decks and you've got financials out there. Well, you show me we're going to be making $80 million in 5 years. That's not enough. I see even lower numbers. And you have to understand the mindset of a startup investor that wants you to go unicorn. You need to 10, 50, maybe 100x their money. And you're not going to be doing that by generating $50 million by year 5. You literally need to be doing double that. So you need to be thinking to yourself, well, how much money can I generate year 1? And then you have to double it, and get to the point where you're doing $100 million by year 5, at the latest by year 7. That's how investors think. So if you don't have the unit economics, you're not solving a harsh enough problem, a painful enough problem that you can get that amount, or you don't have a big enough market to get to $8 billion in transactions. That's a lot of transactions. And they're a $1.9 billion company. So they're like a double unicorn by the time they hit 2024. But if your market's not big enough and you can't analyze that because investors will, well, then you shouldn't be raising venture capital. You shouldn't be trying to build a unicorn, UNICORN. Maybe instead of a unicorn with a U, you built a YO unicorn. And that is something that you can handle and that you understand. Get to $10 million, even $2 million. That's a great business. But that's going to change the investors that you talk to and your mindset and how you build. If there's anything I want you to take away from this, analyzing 56 unicorns, is maybe you don't want to be a unicorn. I know, I think every day, I'm so glad that I'm not trying to build a unicorn because, like I told you, I'm very comfortable with where I am. I'm very fortunate, not complaining whatsoever. I'm fortunate to be 7-time founder and had at least 2 successes, and I've got a portfolio of other startups. But this is where you need to do some soul searching and figure out, hey, should I build the unicorn with a U or a YO unicorn? That's what I want you to think about. And I'm going to continue bringing you these videos. I've learned a lot of other insights from these 56 unicorns, and we can all learn together. Watch some of these other videos that I put on the screen, and I hope this has been helpful for you. Thanks for hanging out on this one. Make sure you let me know what you think, and I'll cover more topics that you want in the future. Thanks for hanging out. Like I said, I'll see you in the next one.